Alright, and now let's get onto the eye. So I'm going to zoom in here and let's just get started. So I'm thinking of making her eyes more like a golden color, kind of like a little cat. So what I'm going to use as a base, as always, is I always start with the base. So I'm going to start with a 052. So that's the bright yellow. Don't mind the white. I know I use the white a lot, but I use the white usually to make things more opaque. So using white for the what's it called? Just for watercolor does not make it brighter. So that's a lot of the misconception that people think that when they use white on watercolor, then it will make their drawings look more opaque. Sorry, it would make the drawings look brighter. That's not really the case. The white is actually made for a more opaque look. So it's made it to be more less transparent, I should say, like that. So just be careful when using white on watercolor. If you want white to show up really nicely, use gouache or acrylic paint. But even then, I just suggest you guys use white gel pens because that's really how you would make a really pure white color. So let's wait for this to dry, and in the meantime, let's go and just kind of draw in her eyebrows because I have not filled those in yet. So I'm going to take that same 197, which I will show again, which is this one here, 197. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this in quite broadly. So I'm going to take my sharp tip and then I'm going to fill that in. And because this is more of a dry, a drier look, the color will appear more saturated. So that's what it looks like. And now I'm going to add some dark while this is still drying. Oh, I forgot to mention that when it's drying, you can tell when it's wet when it's still shiny. So unfortunately, I can't really show this here because you can't really see it. However, if you're looking on your own paper, if you still see, kind of like a little glare on your drawing, that means it's still wet. So when you put in base, just make sure that it is more of a dry color first, make sure it dries first, just because that's just your main thing. If you color right now, it's going to kind of blur and mess up the ombre. So let it dry first a little bit, and then we can continue. So while it's still drying, let's add a little bit of darkness to her hair. Let's add a little bit of shadow. So take your 194, which is a dark brown, dilute it a little bit, mix it in with a little bit of the 197 if you want, just to kind of make it a little bit diluted. So let's go ahead and just draw in some shadows here. So I'm going to draw in shadows, where I placed the shadows before, and that's really all I'm going to do. So while everything is still drying, you can also work on other different things. So not necessarily you always have to work on, the hair the whole time. You could also move on to the next thing and paint in the other parts. So while we wait for the eyes to dry, we can just kind of add a little bit more detail into the hair. And notice how I continue to make sure that my color is diluted so I can still continue to layer colors on top. I don't want it to make it super opaque because that would just lead to more problems. So notice how the color is always more transparent. That is because it's just a safer way to use watercolor. Water can also be used as a boundary. So for instance, if you make something wet first and then you put paint over it, then that will lock in the colors. So I guess, for instance, I will make an area more wet, for example. Like for instance, if I made this area more wet, I'm going to trap the color in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of brown and I'm going to paint on top of the wet spot. So see, it's not spreading anywhere else except for where I made it wet. So if you want to do that, you can also spread it. And that's how I would use water as well. As sort of like a boundary. So it's almost kind of like you use water to trap in the watercolor so it doesn't go anywhere else. That's another way that you can do it. Alright, so this seems to be done drying. You can also touch it to see if it's dry, and it seems to be dry now. So now we are going to overlay with a harsher color. So I would use a 076, number 76, and I'm just going to take a nice dab of it. I would kind of dilute it a little bit, but I think it's fine for now. So now let's kind of paint in on the tops. If it looks a little bit, if it needs a little bit more color, add a little bit more color, but I think this is fine for now. So let's stop here, and if we want to blend the color a little bit, add a little bit of water to your brush, kind of dab it with the napkin, and then kind of smooth it out. And that would make a less intense, a less intense yellow, so it's more like a gradation. And while we're at that point, let's use a number 24 just to give it a little bit of an orange punch, and let's just dab a little bit from the front. So as you can see, or at the top, so as you can see, because it's still wet, it's kind of starting to blend in with the yellow that I put in before because it's not dry yet. So just put this very, very carefully, just kind of put a little bit of dabs here and there, and the water will spread out the color by itself. So try not to overdo it. Just have it just enough. If you want to take out a little bit of the pigment, you can go ahead and take some water and then just spread it elsewhere. So I dabbed some water and then I just kind of softened it. And that is pretty much it for the ombre here. So at this point, let's just continue to wait for it to dry. You can wave it around a little bit if you want to, and that will help dry it faster, but right now it's still a little bit shiny, as you can see here. Because it's shiny, that means it's still wet, so don't touch it yet. And in the meantime, let's work on stuff like the ears. So for the ears, I want it to be kind of like white fluff, but I want it to be kind of like a warm gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this white here, this number 03, and if yours is already mixed with other colors, that's fine, don't worry about it too much. So for mine, it's kind of already a warm color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this white with this kind of already pre-mixed mixture of number 194 and 197. So this is a mix of these two colors here. So I'm not going to use black because black, makes it too harsh. So I'm going to use a brown color and make it a warm gray. So take your 194 and 197, mix the two together and form a diluted mixture. And then add white to it. In fact, add a little bit more of this 194 just to give it a grayer look. And then what you're going to do is you're going to, of course, clean your brush a little bit first before you put in the white. And then once you clean your brush a little bit so it's clear, take your white. And then we can go ahead and mix our white in. Now if you still want it to be a little bit more gray, add a little bit of blue, because blue usually makes things a little bit more gray because brown and blue don't really mix very well. So as you can see, this is starting to look a little bit nasty. That's okay. If you want, you can add a little bit more of the white. Make sure you clean your brush beforehand. And once we have a little bit of white, now we have a warm gray. And a warm gray is basically a gray that is a little bit on the browner side. So if you want also to continue mixing a little bit of the brown into the white, it's a good idea to do. So now let's go ahead and paint in areas like the fur, kind of like the little insides of the fur here. And it's a good idea to also remember what colors you mix so you don't mess it up again. So as you can see, it's a warm color, it's a warm gray, and it matches well with our orange hair. Let's do a little bit on this side too, just kind of shade that in just a little bit so it's not just a plain white. Let's do the same thing on the tips of the ears. So if you need to mix more colors, go ahead and do that. Just add a little bit of white and a bit of everything that I showed you before. If you want it to be a little bit more gray rather than brown, add a little bit of blue. Just a very, very tiny amount. And then let's go ahead and add that nice gray to the tips of the ears. And then fox ears tend to have a little bit of a grayish undertone on the inside rather than pink. So I'm going to take, once again, I'm going to take a dark brown here. I'm going to take my 194. Make sure it's nice and saturated with color, meaning it's full of color. And then I'm going to take a blue. I'm going to take a 143, just a little bit. And I'm going to mix it with my brown here. So I'm going to add a little bit more brown because this looks kind of gross. So I'm going to add a little bit more brown just to make it more brown rather than nasty bluish gray. So this is a good color to start off with. And then what we're going to do is we are going to shade this all in using the dry method. So since I want this more opaque, I want this to be a little bit on the drier side. So rather than putting a bunch of water, I'm putting more color instead of water. And of course, you know, the color will dilute. So I'm going to take some of this color and just paint it on top. If not, if this still doesn't work, then I'm going to just redo. I'm just going to put in more color. So because this is not as saturated as this one is, or not as intense as that one, I'm going to just remix some of the colors of the brown and the black. Sorry, not the brown and the black, the brown and the blue with a little bit more brown. And then I'm going to add it again freshly on top. So it's more out there. There. So that's pretty good for now. And if you want, you can also add this as a very, very dark shadow if you want. So just to kind of emphasize some areas. And opaque, and because this is a little bit more transparent now, this is a good shadow to use. So you don't want your shadows to be too dark. You want it to be dark enough just to kind of add a nice wash, a dark wash over it. Alright, so now once the eyes are pretty much dry, we can go ahead and add some darks. Now take your micron pen, it could be a number 1 or number 2, whatever, and let's just add a little bit of a pupil here. I'm going to add a little bit of sharp pupils here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight inside. So it's going to be pre-filled. And I'm going to wait for that to dry before I smudge this whole thing. So this would be my darkest point. That's just kind of like a little tactic to kind of like cheat the darks a little bit. Just in case if I can't get too dark, I can still use the ink as the darkest point. So anyways. So let's wait for that to dry. If you want, you can fan it. So I'm fanning it right now, if you can't hear the microphone being blown. So let's touch it, see if it's a little bit wet. Let's just fan it a little bit more just so it can dry quicker. And I think this is good. Alright, so now let's go ahead and add the darker darks of the gold color. Now if you want to keep it like this, you know, that's fine by me. I'm making it a little bit darker by adding a little bit of the number 65 here. This is the third color from the right. I'm going to put that on my palette. And then I'm going to mix that in with my, my dark brown here, 194. Just to give it a nice dark brown. Dark kind of gold. And then once I have that done, I can go ahead and put that in the middle here. If you want, you can even add a little bit of dots here and there just to kind of add detail to the eyes. Alright, and that is the eye, that's the eyes here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my gel pen and I'm going to fill in where the highlights were supposed to go. So here, a little space here, I'm going to add my highlights with my gel pen, and that will brighten it up a little bit more. And if you want, you can even add a little bit of highlights down at the bottom as well. There. That is pretty much it for the eyes and the ears. And because we still have enough time, let's go ahead and block in the sweater. So this is more of like an autumn feel. So I want to give her kind of like a greenish olive sweater. So I'm going to give her a sweater that is number 117. So this is kind of like an olive green, which is perfect. Now if you want to block it in, add a little bit of water to your brush, and let's just start filling it in. And of course, if you want to spread out the color more, go ahead and add more water and just continue spreading it. In fact, make the water quite wet first, so it's a wet on wet technique, and then fill in with the number 177. So you can kind of just fill in really smoothly. So notice how because it's wet, there's not going to be a nasty boundary. It's going to just be all very smooth. I think that is a good coating for now. Looks super cute. And now let's wait for it to dry. This is actually would be a nice promotional image. So now let's wait for it to dry. If you want to fan it, go ahead and fan it. Just make sure that when you look at your drawing, it doesn't have that kind of white glare as you can see here. So I'm just fanning it, waiting for it to dry. And once I deem it dry enough, then I will add the shadows, which we will do right after this is dry. So I will be right back because this might take a while. See ya. Alright, now that it is a little bit more dry, touch it to see if it's still a little bit wet. If it's still a little bit damp, it's okay. Just make sure it's not soaking wet. So now that this is dry enough, let's make a darker value. So all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my same number 117 that I used for the sweater, and I'm going to be mixing it with a brown because brown appears quite dark. It's a good substitute for warm darks or warm shadows because it's not black. Black desaturates colors. However, brown, like a dark brown, especially for warm colors like, like a nice warm green or an orange, work great for a shadow. So I'm going to be putting shadows in every groove of where the sweater is. And that'll just be a simple shadow that you guys can do. Of course, if it's fading away, don't worry, just add more pigment. I'm adding a little bit of a gradient here just so it kind of, it's not just like a barcode, it's kind of like blending in with the rest of the colors. And there we have it. We have our little fox girl all done in watercolor. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.